Hey guys, welcome back to Game Rave. This is actually pause mode now that I think about it. This episode's gonna be a little bit more weird. I'm not using a script, I'm kind of going off the cuff. We're doing it live because I wanted to make sure I got it out in time so that the subject matter was still fresh in people's minds, and B, I'm really excited. So the subject, of course, if you looked at the title card before clicking, was the TurboGrafx-16 mini system that was announced by Konami. Side tangent, if you are trying to figure out why Konami announced it, it's because Konami owns all of Hudson's properties and licenses, and the TurboGrafx-16 was originally a deal between Hudson and NEC, so that's why they have the rights to it and everything. Having announced TurboGrafx Mini and all the cool things, how they're doing the different models in each of the different regions, obviously it's clear based on the American and the Japanese game lists that have so far been announced that there are going to be differences in the library. It's not really going to be like the PlayStation where it was only a couple differences. If you're new to the channel, like you came here from AVGN or what have you, if you haven't seen a lot of the older episodes or even some of the Owl Chatters, the TurboGrafx is probably the only system that has more meaning to me than the PlayStation does. And I know that's crazy to say. But at one point in my life, literally all I had was a TurboGrafx-16 with 2 games. I believe it was Dead Moon and Aero Blasters. Because I was actually, at that time, it was in my transitional period, like as you know, going into adult and going off to college and so forth. And I was really just selling off all my game stuff because I hadn't really used it in a while, or like I was just playing the same old games, and I really wasn't looking forward to the 3DO or the Jaguar, so I felt there was no need for it. And after a crazy situation with a guy in a bird suit, I'm not kidding you, I held on to the TurboGrafx and started playing the games, and from there started like playing other games on the TurboGrafx that I had never tried out before. And not only did it end up becoming like one of my first true all-time favorite systems, it was my first actual complete set for a library. So when Konami announced this, it was really, I wouldn't say it was bittersweet, but it was like two sides of the same coin. On one hand, I was like, oh, that's cool, I don't really need it. But then on the other side of me, I was like, wait, this is a chance for like people that never actually like weren't there to fully understand and appreciate all the games that were there. You can play an emulated ROM all you want, but like there's just something about sort of seeing, even if it's a miniaturized version of the original console, to understand where you're coming from on the games that are included with it. Based on the first 6 games that Konami announced, this thing is in good hands. Like, they are going for the die-hard fanboys, and it's gonna be, as long as this isn't a tease and this is actually like legit their path they're going down, it's gonna be a really cool system. Now, they have announced 6 games, but they haven't announced how many total games there are going to be. So I am doing this video based on the fact that most other mini systems on average are between 20 and 25 games, extreme options not included. In a tweet a couple days ago, at least of the original posting of this video, I stated how, mathematically speaking, at 25 games, that would be almost 20% of the TurboGrafx library, which is phenomenal because you can get practically every great game and then some onto the system. At least that's what I thought. And then in doing this video, I decided to actually pull all the games from the library that I wanted to feature, and I got to within the last 3 I needed to pull, and I realized I was already starting to have to make like honorable mentions, and like I had to start cutting them to like get to the 25 I needed, which speaks volumes for the system's library. In deciding what games to pull to show you what I would like to see on the system, unlike my original PlayStation Classic What If 2-part video, that one was based on trying to get it as close to the NES Classic as possible, because at the time the NES Classic was the only thing out there. This video is more personal. This is like, these are the games that I would love to see on there from a personal standpoint, as well as ones I'd like to see on there too as a historical standpoint, to get other people interested in the system and the games that may not have had a chance to play them back in the day, or even to this point through emulation. So for those of you that haven't seen the news, we're going to start with the 6 games that Konami's already announced. The first one is Dungeon Explorer, which, if you remember my Idle Chatter conversation, that is the price tag from the microplay I used to work at. I actually bought this and a couple other games for real cheap when I only had the TurboGrafx just to start trying stuff out. Dungeon Explorer is the closest you'll get to Gauntlet on the TurboGrafx. decent game, definitely fun, but I wouldn't like call it like the like oh my god, like you have to have it like day one purchase. But it's the game that will get you into the simple controls, figuring out like how everything works. It's got a very unique graphic style that a lot of the TurboGrafx games have. Like it's kind of interesting. Like if like the Super Nintendo, the TurboGrafx, and the Genesis all really had their own unique visual style, even across the same game. Case in point, like Street Fighter Championship Edition, or say technically Contra, even though they're different games, they all have their own unique art style. Next up was Alien Crush, which is a phenomenal pinball game. Just great graphics, easy to get into. Probably one of the most fun, like relaxing, laid back games you can play. Like 20 years ago when I had it, like if I have come home from college, I would literally just pop it in, you know, grab a soda or something, just relax for an hour before working on homework and so forth, or go heading off to work. It's a really good pinball game. This one, Ninja Spirits, this is my baby. If you love Ninja Gaiden, you will love Ninja Spirits. Ninja Spirits has the same gameplay style. Obviously, it's a ninja. You can get shadow characters. What makes this game awesome, besides its somewhat, truth be told, simplicity and ease, like it's really easy, like you can finish it in a day, is that you were able to store different weapons, and each of the weapons had different levels of power. So you can have ninja stars, you can have these crazy, they're like almost like scorpion chains to like latch out and so forth. You can power up his sword so you get stronger. It was clearly never as iconic as Ninja Gaiden was, but like that is like my top 5 games of TurboGrafx. Like I'm so happy Ninja Spirits on there. Next up, we'll do this backwards. Next up is New Adventure Island. Obviously this one had to be on there because it's Hudson. New Adventure Island, if you've never played any of the Adventure Islands, it's basically just a side-scrolling like adventure game, like a Mario or a Mascot title, where you play essentially a caveman, kind of. I mean, he's not really a caveman per se, but basically he's a islander. You could ride skateboards, he threw an axe, you collect, you know, fruit for points and so forth. Basically another rescue the girl type adventure game. That'd be really good for the people just starting out, like how Dungeon Explorer is. Next up is like one of the King of Kings, R-Type. R-Type was amazing on the TurboGrafx, but what's interesting is that in reality, the US version is actually 2 cartridges in one. In Japan, the first 4 levels of R-Type were its own game, and then the last 4 became like R-Type 2, I think they called it, or something like that. And in the US, they just merged everything back into one long game. That will be the challenge game. That's the one that's gonna like make people like just, you know, say, hey, I beat this game, look at me, I'm great, without having to get the trophy or platinum to prove it. Last of the already announced games was another near and dear top 5 game for me, Ys 1 and 2. This is just an absolute iconic role-playing game from the system, and it has been redone in modern era. I played the remake on, I believe, the DS or the 3DS, and then it was released on other systems. The combat is interesting because you don't actually like sword slash people, you basically like bump into them. So you're basically leveling up to be a stronger walk into people hero. But Ys 1 and 2's music for the time, and this is back when like CD-ROM technology was like the new end-all be-all thing. The music was so unbelievably good for its time. There's one stage, in fact, my friend Chris, when he got his Turbo Duo for the first time, was playing Ys 1 and 2. One of the first dungeons in the soundtrack has the sound of dripping water, and he literally thought his sink was dripping in the kitchen until he realized it was part of the soundtrack. That's how amazing the sound was for back in the day, when we all had boom boxes and like, you know, only 2 speakers for our surround sound systems. But that's basically what's included already. So this next stack is going to be what I would love to see on the system. As I already stated, I went with the 25 game count just to get more games in there. It'll probably more than likely just be like 20 or so games, but we went with 25 just in case. And what is really nice is because Ys is on the system, that means that CD-ROM games are open season. Like, that can play both the Hue cards and the CD-ROMs from the ISOs and the ROMs. So with that in mind, here are my hopes of what's going to be on the TurboGrafx Mini, and presented in no particular order. First up is Splatterhouse. Now, this one comes with an asterisk. This is a phenomenal arcade game translation. The catch being the TurboGrafx version on the American side was censored. They removed a lot of the religious visuals, and I believe some blood in some of the areas, if you can believe it. If Konami would translate the Japanese version and port it over to the American side, that would be incredible. That would just be excellent. It's a slow move. If you've never played it, it's a slow-moving, side-scrolling action game. You basically essentially play not Jason Voorhees, just using a 2x4 to whack all the zombies and mutants to death. Just a really, really good action game for its time. This one is a hope and dream because it's probably, now that I'm thinking about it, is probably one of only 2 or 3 games that they would have to renew a license to put it on here. And what I mean by license is something that is a perpetual license, like every time you have to use it, you'd have to pay money. The first being John Madden Football for John Madden himself and any of the football licenses. This one, they might be able to get away with just removing his name, but that is Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu. This is actually I don't know if people can see this on the camera. Oh, yeah, I can. It's basically just a side-scrolling adventure game, kind of like how Kid Nicky was on the Nintendo, kind of like Mario, but goofier characters. One of the best guilty pleasures I've played on the system. Just really fun, really simple, kind of addictive, depending on your gameplay mechanics and so forth. Really nice graphics. Next up would be Soldier Blade. This is the one that you play for the hardcore junkies. Like, this is one of the best spaceship shooters on Earth, and it just looked absolutely awesome on the TurboGrafx. You had super huge bosses for the time, just absolutely great. In fact, I don't know if I even finished it or not. My friend Alan can attest to my struggling through Aero Blasters. Next up is the obvious one. Now, I've already done a review on this game on pause mode, and it is a good game. It's a great game. It's not worth its real-world price point, but having it on the Mini would give so many people the chance to finally play it because it is a good game. It's just not a good $5,000 game, and that is, of course, Magical Chase. For more info on this, just watch my video review of it. It's basically a spaceship shooter, but you're playing a witch on a broom instead of spaceships. For our next game, this is for the Contra folks, which would be Bloody Wolf. Literally Contra, just run and gun, shoot here, shoot there. You can sometimes get onto a motorcycle. What's interesting is it's not perfectly straightforward. It's actually like a Ninja Turtles game where you can move up and down as well. Easy to get into. It's a little, by today's standards, it's probably a little bit goofy in the controls, but still worthy of being on this mini system. For our next 2 games, they might come across as weird choices, but bear with me. The first is World Court Tennis. Super fun tennis game in its own right. It's basically Pong for the TurboGrafx, but obviously with rackets and a net. And the other is Final Lap Twin by Namco. Another good racing game, kind of like playing Rad Racer back in the day, but on the TurboGrafx. Now, what makes these 2 games important to have on the system is actually not the games themselves, but what's in there option-wise. Both of these games had role-playing game modes, RPG. So instead of saying like in Dragon Quest, where you'd fight a slime and then have to power up your sword or your shield, in Final Lap Twin, your battles are the races. And once you win the races, those use the money from the races to upgrade your tires, upgrade your parts, and so forth. In World Court Tennis, it's actually upgrading your shoes, your tennis rackets, your shirts, and eventually you have to take on the Tennis King for the final battle. It was so goofy at the original point of entry years ago that as someone who isn't into sports games, I bought these just to play the RPG parts of it, and it's hilarious. It's actually really, really good. Next up is a little more of a personal thing. That is JB Harold Murder Club. I've already done a review on this to a degree when I reviewed the Manhattan Requiem on the Laser Active. It's a text-based detective story where you basically play Detective JB Harold and you have to solve a murder mystery. And it is menu-based, kind of like Beyond Shadowgate where like you go to a house, you have to like investigate, talk to, research it, blah blah blah. For people that in the modern day like Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, that would be a phenomenal game to get into. It can be slow moving. I'd actually be impressed if they kept the voiceover work in it through the emulation, but it would be a perfect game for someone looking for something different to play. Our next game is a cheat, and I'll explain why for those that have never played TurboGrafx before. The way you cheat and get 28 games instead of 25 on the system is to include the ISO of Gates of Thunder. Now, Gates of Thunder in and of itself is just one of the best shooters you'll ever play. From an incredible soundtrack, really easy to get into power-ups, great enemy character designs, just an awesome intro. It's a no-brainer to have on that system. Now, the reason I say you cheat is because in reality, the Gates of Thunder disc actually has 4 games on it. It's got Gates of Thunder, Bonk 1 and Bonk 2, known as Bonk's Adventure and Bonk's Revenge, and then through a code you could play the original Bomberman. You would technically have an easy way to get extra games into the system without having to worry about actually getting extra games. I know on the Wii U's Virtual Shop they had Gate of Thunder, but it was actually yanked off the disc, so it didn't have the other games with it. I really hope they put it as a single ISO on there, because that would be absolutely phenomenal and a great way to like get in some extra games for the player. This one is on here because it's just goofy enough that it would work. Like, I don't really have a game I could compare it to, like on an NES Classic. It would kind of be like Jumping Flash or maybe Intelligent Cube on the PlayStation, and that's Somer Assault. The best way to describe this game is imagine an Egyptian slinky, where like you're literally just slinking along through different stages, and you've got like little turrets at, I think it's been a while since I played. I think it's on the front, back, and center that you use to shoot other items in game and so forth. It's definitely a break from the norm. Like you couldn't really call it like an adventure game or an action game. It's literally just itself, almost like an art dink game. So that would be an interesting game just to give someone like a really crazy, like, what, as they're going through the games. Obvious choice, if you've got Gates of Thunder, you have to have Lords of Thunder. Lords of Thunder is another spaceship shooting up game on the system, except instead of spaceships, in this one you're essentially playing humans. You play Landis, this guy right here, and then the bosses are actually the other humans. And if you can see, right, I'm trying to get that reflection of the light. When you go to fight these humans, they become these giant, huge creatures. Just like Gates of Thunder, the soundtrack to this is absolutely off the charts ridiculous. Some of the most gorgeous artwork the system ever had. If you have a Sega CD, they do have this available on that system. More or less the same. The color palette's a little bit off, but it can be super expensive to buy on the Sega CD. Highly recommended. Just an absolutely amazing game. I am totally fanboying right now, and I completely apologize. Next up is Cotton. Just a little amazing game where, like Magical Chase, instead of it being a spaceship shooter, you're playing, once again, another witch on a broom. Where Magical Chase was more kind of like Rainbow Brighty with its characters and graphics, Cotton is just a lot more goofy. Kind of like if you took like Candyland and made it psychotic. There's like skeletons or skulls on horses' heads and things like that, and just, it's awesome. Next up, we have a game that is near and dear to my heart. It is one of the best guilty pleasures on earth, and I know people will disagree with me, but they have to include it on there, is Riot Zone. Now, Riot Zone is essentially the TurboGrafx's version of Final Fight, but like with its own characters. It is so cheesy, and it is so like the main character, like Fake Cody, like right here, like Fake Cody and Fake Hagar. The voice actors for the characters are so bad that you've got this like big bulking, tough guy, and when you do a super move, it's like Riptar, or whatever he says. Like if you remember playing Super Street Fighter 2 for the first time and hearing Guile having the announcer's voice, you were like, what? It's so bad, it's good. That's the type of game it is. Coming up around the bend to our last 6 entries. This one you would have on there to have the Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 dynamic, which is East 3. Now, I actually just finished this a couple months ago, and I was meant to do a pause mode episode for it, but I never got around to it, so I'll eventually have to. Ys 3 took the top-down original Zelda angle, and just like Zelda 2, changed it into a side-scrolling adventure. Ys 3 is a lot easier than Zelda 2. In fact, just like the original Ys, it has this thing where essentially, as you're leveling up, like let's say you're level 10, if you get to level 11, characters that were giving you a trouble at level 10 will now be, say, 25% easier. So if you get to level 12, those same enemies will now be like 50% easier. And there gets a point in Ys 3 where if you max out your stats, which you can do in both games, because both games have an exploit in them to make it happen faster than you normally could, the only people that become a problem are the end bosses. And while Ys 3 itself is a fairly short game as far as role-playing games go, it's still excellent in its music and its voiceovers. The game's only real fault was that it had this crazy visual trick where like the background was scrolling at a weird speed, so it kind of gave you like almost like a slideshow effect in the background. But it does deserve to be on there and to complement Ys 1 and 2. Our next contestant is one that is special to me because there's a story involved, is Tricky Kick. Now, Tricky Kick is a puzzle game in where, the best way to describe it is, imagine if you have a Pac-Man maze, but instead of the ghost chasing you, there's now like four green ghosts here, 4 blue ghosts here, 4 red ghosts here. But they're all separated, and you have to basically kick them into each other to cancel them out, like the 3 balls and bust a move. Tricky Kick will always be in my heart, not just because it's an excellent puzzle game, is because I was stuck on one puzzle. I did the entire game except one puzzle, and my friend Audra and Alan came over because we were going to head out somewhere, and I just got frustrated, and as I went to turn the system off, I said, here, try it, just see how hard it is. And my friend Audra did it on the first shot. No problem, like 2 minutes done. I haven't played it since. I'll probably go back to it and erase the save data so I can play through it again, especially for pause mode. If we're talking about goofy instances, Riot Zone is probably like, if Riot Zone is like, say, princely comedy and unintentional goofiness, this game right here is king. And if this isn't on the mini, I will just bust heads. And that is Last Alert. Now, if you have never, ever heard of Last Alert, Last Alert is sort of like Akari Warriors. It's a top-down shooter, basically, you know, run around, shoot bad guys, go through stages, etc. What made Last Alert so memorable is that the voice acting is absolutely bottom of the barrel bad. Like you can tell that these are not professional voice actors. They are probably just recording in a room somewhere. All the like inflection and connotation is wrong. There's a scene where the hero is about to face a bad guy with I believe a gun or a helicopter, and he's just like, hey, let my baby Betty give you a kiss. And the hero responds, you're weird naming your helicopter. And then the mission starts. Oh my god, it's so good. Like, seriously, if it's not on there, I will be so depressed. Coming up around the bend, game and its sequel. My friend Alan actually pointed this out on Twitter. Legendary Axe 1 and 2. There's 1 and 2. If Castlevania Rondo of Blood is not on the American system, these will be the closest you get to Castlevania on the TurboGrafx. But instead of vampires, you are essentially a loincloth hero with, obviously, a legendary axe. And you just crawl through the stages, fighting off the huge bosses. It literally is Castlevania, just from the way the characters animate, to the floating enemies, to the jumps you have to make. I wouldn't call them top tier games, but for the time they definitely were system sellers, especially in the old magazine ads. They always used some of the boss, the one blue and gold boss from Legendary Access 2 early stage. And then last but not least, a game that truly deserves to be on there, It has been released on other systems, including my baby, the PlayStation, but it would be neat to see the original in its original form, and that is Military Madness. Military Madness is a strategy RPG, but instead of it being a grid, it's a hexagon system. In fact, if going back to Starfighter Sandvine on the PlayStation review, so like if your unit is here and you have a unit here, and then you actually move another unit into one of the other 5 spots, you get a bonus for damage because there's multiple units touching that enemy unit's hex. A very long game. You can actually play both good guys and bad guys, although that basically just comes down to if you're playing blue or green in the game. The Military Madness was one of the first games in my formative college, like, high school, college years. It was probably one of the first games I truly binged. Like, I can clearly remember days when I'd get home either from job or from school, and I would have just bought a fresh bag of Chex Mix and whatever soda I was drinking at the time, and 5 hours later of the day, that Chex Mix bag would be empty, that soda would be empty, and I would have gone through another like 5 or 6, missions or other stages and just perfecting everything. The PlayStation version was a 3D remake, and it was okay, it was fine, but the loading time was really bad. This really is the only way to play Military Madness. And that's pretty much the 25 games I would like to see on there, both from a personal standpoint, as well as I feel like they're the best ones to give non-Turbo players the chance to see what's on the system. Honorable mentions that I could see easily making the system would be, as far as spaceship shooters go, would be like Dead Moon, Psychosis, which is a crazy spaceship shooter. Sid Meets Terraforming is another good one. Some of the late releases, like Dynastic Hero, it's a good game, but I could see a modern gamer getting bored with it right away. I could have put the Bombermans on there. I technically did with Gates of Thunder. But Bomberman is so readily available on every other system out there, including the Switch. I felt like it would be a waste to have it on there because people would have already experienced it. Other than that, the only real series I kind of regret not having on there, actually 2 of them now I think about it, would be Silent Debuggers, which was a first-person shooter, basically, kind of like in the vein of Alien, but it's very framey and it can get really confusing and really freaking hard. And then the other was the Netopia series. Netopia 1 and 2 are literally the closest you could get to the original Zelda, and I mean like NES 8-bit Zelda on the TurboGrafx. They were really good games, but it was clearly, they were clearly rip-offs of Zelda, and I don't think that would be fair to the TurboGrafx's legacy to come across as just a knockoff Nintendo system. That's what I would really, really, really like to see. If there's a chance that we actually get imports on there, Castlevania Rondo of Blood is an obvious choice because it's one of the most iconic games on there. Like I said, it's already been available on PSP and the Castlevania Collection. I would love to see them bring over the Gradius 2 Super CD-ROM, which was incredible. It's been way too long since I played TurboGrafx or even imported stuff. I'd actually like to see the Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition release of on the PC Engine on the American one. I'm sure Capcom won't do it, but that was just an absolute incredible translation. And I doubt there were other like the arcade game. It's the space Sapphire. Sapphire would be interesting, but I doubt that they'd have the arcade graphics support on there, or arcade graphics support on there. But yeah. All right, guys. So I'm gonna edit out as many ums as possible and any swallowing that I do. But yeah, the TurboGrafx Mini, just based on the 6 games alone they have, it is gonna be an awesome time, and I cannot wait to see it. I will more than likely pick it up day one. Otherwise, have a great week. I will see you next episode, hopefully a Game Rave TV episode, and we'll go from there. Take care, guys. Have a great one.